Hello, good people, and welcome to the Nothing Above the Moon podcast. I'm your host, Mike Johnson, joined by my co-host, Cam Huff.
Thank you.
This is episode 10 of the most amazing, awesome podcast you're ever going to listen to. Today, we have a special guest in the studio. We have Jovasha Lang of Lang Consulting and Counseling, LLC. Jovasha?
Hello.
What's up?
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on Nothing Above the Moon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you got it right.
Yeah. Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
Yeah, it makes it extra special because this is my older sister. I got two older sisters, and she's the closest in age to me.
Yes, let's specify. I'm not the oldest.
You're not the oldest, but you're the closest in age.
Yes.
Yeah. So, how everything been going?
It's good. You know, life is good. Living my best life, trying to help others live their best life. So hopefully we'll talk about that and give some key pointers and tips on how people can do that.
Okay.
Good.
You plan on traveling anytime soon?
I do. I plan on traveling a couple places. Hawaii is on the list for this year.
Nice.
Bora Bora is going to be the birthday trip.
What the hell is Bora Bora at?
So, look, this is why you shouldn't plan things and you don't know where they are. I just saw these little over-the-water huts, and I was like, I need to be there. That is going to be my happy place. Okay. But I think it's in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, it's in Asia. Yeah. It's in Asia.
Okay. Close enough.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I want to go to Bora Bora.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Delta Vacations is giving me a great package, so that's where I'm going.
Oh man, what Delta? What's the price of Delta Vacation packages? That's the key. Yeah.
Well, it depends on how close to the ocean in the over-the-water hut you want to be, but the baseline starts at about $7,000.
Oh, that's not, I got $7,000
Oh,
right
yeah,
now.
I can do it right now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That ain't bad at all.
So that's the flight, and that is the over-the-water hut.
Do they give you food? It
is all inclusive.
Oh,
It is all inclusive.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
I hope I can eat $7,000 worth of food.
Oh, you can.
Yeah.
Oh, you make it happen, bro.
They got vegan food?
I'm sure they do.
No, they don't.
Yeah, probably not. No.
Okay.
But I think you can make it work, right?
Okay. Well, I know we wanted to, get into some subject matter with you, and
yes.
you're a specialist at what you're doing right now. Can you tell the folks what is your actual job title?
Yes, so I am the executive director and owner of Lang Counseling and Consulting Group. And so I have a background in clinical social work. So my master's degree is in social work, and I have a state board certification in Florida and Georgia to provide mental health therapy for individuals.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a lot of schooling, man.
It is, right? But
yeah. What made you want to do your own business? What made you want to go into, create your own business, I should say?
I feel like people ask me that all the time, and I'm always searching for this really in-depth answer. But I think the real answer is I wanted to be able to do it my way. I think that you have to follow everybody's rules, right, at any given time. And I still have to follow rules and regulations. But I wanted to provide services in a manner that I thought was conducive for the population that I was serving. I did not want to be under the guise of how other people thought it should be ran. I wanted to implement my own ideas and strategies and innovations based on my culture, based on my background, based on what I felt was the need emotionally, socially, environmentally. And so I wanted to be able to do that in a setting that I was able to determine.
Okay.
So the way to do that was to do it myself.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think most people want to go in business, and the hardest part about going into business is actually doing it. Talking about it is one thing, because Mike and myself wanted to, I definitely wanted to do the podcast. I put it out in the air, but he was talking about, hey man, you want to do this? I like, yeah, and we kind of put the groundwork down. So how tough was it for you to actually start doing the business? How to actually go into business and say, you know what, I'm going to actually do this instead of talking about it?
It was really hard in terms of, I think I neglected the business aspect, right? So you're the business mind of the family, right? You and our oldest sibling. Shout out to Shalonda, right? So I was just thinking about the service. I just wanted to see people, right? Basically, I wanted to sit in that couch, in that chair, and give the therapy service. I didn't think about the logistics of running a business, meaning starting it, naming it, branding that name, utilities, furnishing, everything is on you from the toilet paper to the front door, right? So you have to make sure all of that is done, and then you have to get the right people in there because you can't do it all. And so my mindset initially was, I can do it all. I'll start small and I'll be able to build. But looking back, I needed someone from the very beginning to buy into that. But it has worked out well because I think I've learned that lesson. So now I've put people in place to assist because I was trying to answer the phone, clean the building, see the clients, right? Pay the rent. You can't do it all.
Clean the building now. Hold on now.
Well, you cleaned the building initially. That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I went in and cleaned them nasty toilets. I didn't paint, but I cleaned the building. So
you did.
Yeah.
But no, I think really logistically speaking, no one tells you how to start a business. Mm-hmm. When you go to school and you get education, you're getting schooled and you're getting education in your craft. But they're not telling you how to start a business. Like, what is day one? Mm-hmm. What do you do? And so I had to meet with other people that were in business. And I said, do you mind if we have a lunch date, a coffee date? And so you can enlighten me as to how did you get where you were. And so being open and being transparent with people really helps because I took this binder that I bought at like Ross. And it was like, had some inspirational quote on the front. I can't even remember, but I still have it. And I would meet with people and I would ask them, how did you get started? What is my first step? What are some techniques I should do? And then I took that information and I really started looking for, okay, location. What population I wanted to serve, what would be best for that population. Because I had to think about, well, if they didn't have a car, do I want to be somewhere where they're accessible to get to me via bus or cab or any other public form of transportation? So you have to think about those logistics that no one tells you how to do that. They just tell you about building revenue, right, and how to make a business successful in terms of the financial gain. But it's all those little steps that no one helps, enlighten you on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How long? So when you started your business, how long did it take for you to realize you needed help?
It took me about 4 months. And I want to say because I was still in another capacity full time. So I was only doing it at a part-time level. Mm-hmm. But I was like, oh, I'm taking away from free time because in my free time, I'm having to do business time. So it took about 4 months for me to realize, look, it would be beneficial if you had someone helping. Mm-hmm. Okay. Basic stuff, scheduling, making phone calls, making flyers, because I was doing all of that. And the team, I have friends that just helped out. They didn't get a paycheck. Mm-hmm. Shout out to the free labor that you get from friends.
Yeah. For sure. Shout out to the NCAA.
Yeah.
Making money off these kids' backs.
But you do. You use the resources that are available to you. And so if I could go back, I think that early on I would have implemented someone in even a part-time capacity to help with that groundwork, because a lot of things got neglected. But now, I would tell somebody that came to me, like, you have to have someone to help you, even if it's just in the thought process. Kind of like what you guys are doing. Okay. Somebody has to have the idea and somebody has to say, okay, how do we actualize it? Because you need that, bounce back off of each other.
Okay. Now, thinking about today's society and how mental health works and what's going on in the world. So you have all these massive shootings. I mean, we just had a massive shooting at in Florida at Oakland Park, Florida, down there by Fort Lauderdale. You had the shooting in Orlando at that club. You had the shooting in Vegas. You had shootings at schools, countless shootings, right? And most of these people that you hear about in these shootings, they kind of attribute something's wrong with them. It's like something's mentally off with them. It's never like the person who comes out of there and he just has a good day and then whatever reason he had a bad day, he's going postal. It's almost like symptoms of certain things that's happening. Do you think, most of these, things that are happening in the world are attributed to things that people don't get help with at an earlier age, as far as mental health? I
absolutely do. And for a personal preference and a professional one, I don't like the term something is wrong with them, right? Because one of the things that I tell all of my clients when they first start with me is that no one had a perfect life, right? So you can go from the Kennedys, you can go from the Rockefellers. There was always something that somebody might have wanted to change or change in their environment, whether it be financial, emotionally, parent-child connection. There's no perfect life. I'm not saying it was abusive in any way, but there are always things that could have been different, right? So we all at some point could benefit from that therapeutic intervention to talk about some things that have happened. And so for individuals that have had specific trauma, and those things build up and they don't have an outlet, a positive outlet through either therapy or some other type of intervention, that can build and it can escalate over time to where you see things like that. So mass depression and individual things that are not being treated in the internal and external environment of a person can lead to things that we've seen in society. So I absolutely believe that a lot of this untreated mental health mental health goes undiagnosed. Sometimes it's not diagnosed correctly, like we all see with ADHD. I feel like people misdiagnose trauma for, that's attention deficit. They're hyperactive because of this, or they're inattentive because of this. But have you looked at the environmental factors in which that child lives or that individual lives? And so I think that not accurately diagnosing and understanding what the environment is and over-diagnosing and medicating or lack thereof is contributing to what we're seeing. Absolutely.
You think medication, far as with, like, going back to ADHD, right? That the pills that they used to give kids, or I think they still give kids, are Ritalin pills, right?
They used to diagnose Ritalin. Used to prescribe Ritalin, not diagnose. But a lot of times, it's very rare to see someone prescribe that as a physician now, because it has had, research has said, looking back, that medication was not necessarily the best. So it's different types of ADHD medication. So you have Concerta now, you have Seroquel, you have the Intuitive, but Ritalin is really, off the market pretty much.
Yeah, because most of these drugs I heard of, like antidepressant drugs, right, that's supposed to suppress things that are, causing you to have these, episodes. But if a person doesn't, take these pills or go get diagnosed, people automatically put them in a category, like you said, like you don't, it's external, internal categories that you're put in because of people, deem you to be put in these categories. But overall, most of these things that I feel like people are not, not getting the treatment at, in society is because that they don't have people to, talk to them or coach them on certain things. As a kid myself, it's certain things that I've seen and experienced on my level, and obviously about these things that we had to overcome them. People would tell us to pray about it. That's the classic word in the black community, is to pray about it, or take it to God, or everything's gonna be all right. So nobody would come back and try to figure out what's wrong with you. They would just tell you, this is what you need to do. Read the Bible. How do you feel about certain folks that overlooks what a kid is doing in their household, and maybe just tells them, hey, you need to do this, and then everything is going to be all right?
I think that a lot of that is a lack of knowledge and understanding, because you can only give from what you have. So if no one has explained to you, or you have a good knowledge base about what this looks like, what is this, you don't know how to really control for or to assist. So you're right, religious beliefs and spiritual beliefs are grounded in a lot of family systems. And so it is the thing of, well, let's pray about it, or let's go into prayer, or let's take you to church about it. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that is your spiritual and religious belief for your family system. However, in conjunction with that, I would always challenge someone to say, okay, well, if this is not your area of expertise, then let's go to someone that it is. Because you can't, if your son has the flu, right, you're not a doctor, you take them to the doctor, right? And so I think it needs to be that same situation. The stigma for medical health, there is not one but it is one for mental health. So it's that term, they're crazy, you're crazy, there's nothing wrong with you, we don't believe in that. So I tell people, it's just as if you had any other illness, or if there was a concern that there was an illness, you would take them to the appropriate profession or professional. So it's the same thing. We have to have people understand that there's no stigma attached to mental health. That's just another way of caring for the mind, body, and and the spirit of a person.
What kind of prescriptions would you, besides like actual, I'm not talking about pills, what would you tell somebody who feels like they said they're depressed? Would you have them more or less maybe take a vacation, or do yoga, or do something they enjoy, or read a book? Because it's things that you can talk to somebody, you can counsel them on, but what are they going to do when they get home? Because certain things, for certain people like me, I need to be in a happy place, right, as I call it. So for me, I might, take enjoyment in playing like a video game, or, going playing sports, or watching my favorite TV episode to kind of take me out of that depression. Do you have any things, like little small things that you tell people that they can do to help them?
I definitely do. I ask every client, what is your self-care? because we have to have some self-care, whether it's video games. For me, it's vacationing and, going to concerts. You have to have self-care, but we also have to understand, what economical range you're in, what your environment is like. Is your environment set up for that type of self-care? So if it's not, we have to look at what is. So there's a lot of free activities, walking, exercising, joining, groups, different groups. There's single groups, there's professional groups, there's mommy and me, daddy and me, so I try to get them involved in community activities so they're not isolating, because with depression it's a lot of isolation, and so you want to encourage someone to get out and do things, whether it be alone or with others. So you want to get them out of that environment that's helping to foster that. But we definitely look at self-care. Journaling is a big one that I always ask, because I said that's something that you can start to get what's in your head out of your head by just simply putting it on paper. So we're journaling thoughts, you're journaling feelings. Go through music and journal. I'll give one of the assignments I give a lot of my clients is I call it a track list. So every movie has a track list, right? It has a soundtrack. And so the soundtrack usually tells the story of the movie, or it used to, right? Back in the day, you could tell by the song what was going to happen in the next scene. So I say, if we did a soundtrack or a movie on your life and this was the soundtrack, give me the songs that would describe it. And we play those songs in session and we stop at different points. Tell me what this represents. And I also encourage them to do that at home, because you can get the feeling and the emotion out in that positive outlet. So helping them find outlets.
Man, that's good. I never looked at it like that. That's actually kind of neat that you have like a soundtrack to your life. Like you can, I know, for rappers, when you made a mention of a journal, that's how most guys got out their, their expressions. They put it on a piece of paper and they expressed it in their music. So when you usually hear people's first album, like your favorite rapper, Jay-Z.
Yeah, shout out to Jay.
Oh, man, for sure.
The greatest rapper of all time.
Well, hold on. Let's digress. Let's go to this subject real quick.
Of all time.
Because I feel like Jay-Z is one of the greats, but I don't think he's the GOAT.
Here we go.
Now, rap, being a rapper or being an MC is two different things, right? Jay-Z is an MC and a rapper. He's both. He's a GOAT. But it's a feeling when you listen to certain music, and certain people give me a certain feeling.
Project Pat?
Project Pat gives me a feeling. Lil Boosie gives me a feeling. Juvenile, you can't listen. UGK, all these guys give me a certain feeling, because some people you're gonna relate to more because of where you're from, and then you got a lot of people who gonna speak to the masses. Tupac and Biggie always starts off most people's list, right? Then you got Eminem, Nas, Jay-Z.
Hold on, cuz. So Jay-Z not the GOAT, man. Who you got as the GOAT, man?
Thank you.
Right now you talking about some riff rap, but who you got as the GOAT?
Thank
right
you.
now, cuz. Now you running around the subject, man, because you can't. You put a big little pause on what you said, Jay-Z, man. So who you got, bro?
The GOAT, it's quite evident who the GOAT is.
Who?
The GOAT is Biggie Smalls.
And end podcast.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Biggie Smalls, for his 2-year or 4-year run, had albums that was amazing. And and for Jay-Z is right now the GOAT of rap.
Right now?
Right now.
No.
But historically, he's in my top 3.
No.
So who's number 2 then? Or is he number 2?
He's number 2.
Okay.
Jay-Z's number 2.
So he's in the top 2.
Number 3 is Pop.
Okay.
Let's not encourage this foolishness. First,
So
let me say the thing that no one wants to say. I feel like people put Biggie Smalls as you say, the GOAT, because he died, and so you never knew, we can never know what his greatest level of achievement would be. So we just put it out there as if it was so great.
Same thing I said last week.
Exactly. So how can you compare that to Jay-Z?
Jay-Z has a longer cap. Look, if I compare, it's like NBA players, right? Like some guys who fizzle out. So for instance, let me take Grant Hill or Penny Hardaway, right?
Okay.
And compare them to like somebody like a LeBron James, or even let's just even throw, I'm not gonna throw Michael in there. Let's say LeBron James or like Kevin Durant. So you take Grant Hill and Anthony Hardaway and LeBron and KD. If you compare their years at their highest peaks and how they played, they're probably similar in how many points they score, how many assists, how many rebounds, because they're great basketball players. But, with those players, they had injuries that tend to, wither them away from the NBA, and they became, less important. Mm-hmm. With Biggie, he passed away tragically. He He made Life After Death. He made Ready to Die, Life After Death, and then he was going to do Born Again. So the first CD was 1 disc, the second CD was supposed to be 2, and then the third CD was supposed to be 3, and then he was going to retire.
That third album was trash. I keep telling you that, man.
That's because he wasn't here.
And you said supposed to be, right? Okay.
Well, if Biggie was here, my whole claim is that his first 2 albums, compared to Jay-Z's first 2 albums, destroyed Jay-Z's albums. But Jay-Z was here to, now granted, In My Lifetime, Volume 1 is good, and I love Reasonable Doubt.
Reasonable Doubt is the best, most underrated album ever because he did not get critical acclaim for Reasonable Doubt, which he should.
Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet is the most underrated album of all time.
Cue Jay-Z, this is about to be a family feud.
Yeah.
Because, but I like it. I like the fact that it is a.
Yeah, shout out to Public Enemy. Go listen to Fear of a Black Planet. That was a great album.
I agree with you, man, but I don't know if it's the most underrated album of all time.
Okay, so Mike, we're going to put you on the spot. Who is the GOAT?
Greatest rapper of all time? Jay-Z.
Thank you.
Yeah.
2 against 1. See?
I agree.
Yeah. Next.
Cam know that.
Yeah.
Cam know it too. Cam just want to be different right now.
You
Cam
do.
He know better.
You need to go to a Jay-Z concert. You need to be in the venue and see what he does without a hype, no thrills, him and a mic. And that will help you understand the greatness that comes from that. No puffy sets, nothing wrong with puffy. No, huge productions, no shiny suits, just him and the mic. Him and that mic. Yeah, that's it.
Jay-Z had a shiny suit video back in the day. People forget about that video when he did In My Lifetime Volume 1. What was I forget the song, but he did a video. He was copying,
No such thing.
Oh.
No such thing.
Yeah, he did.
When Jay had a shiny suit on?
Yeah, help me understand.
He had a video similar. He didn't have per se the shiny suit, but
now
he's
backtracking.
Yeah.
Now you're backtracking.
I'm not backtracking. We gonna do these facts because we call them over here. We don't have to have facts. It's just
okay. Yeah, you're right. Jay did have a shiny suit on.
So he had a shiny suit. So
yeah,
we don't necessarily have to have facts when we spit things out.
Okay.
Jay-Z, and that's why I think, I'm glad that you went into mental health because you probably need to counsel yourself from time to time about who you deem as the GOAT of rap. Now, me and you both agree that Michael Jordan is the GOAT of basketball, but LeBron is slowly creeping.
It doesn't matter. He'll never be able to surpass Michael Jordan.
Because
here we go.
Because he won. Because Mike is 6-6 in the finals and he never lost, right?
Because he's Michael Jordan. That's how it is about Jay-Z. He's Jay-Z. He's Sean Carter. In the story, period. Not a comma, a period.
Okay.
It does not matter if LeBron wins 10 more championships. He'll never be Michael Jordan.
You
You cannot surpass the person that is your mentor that you have wanted to be. Everyone wants to be Mike. Everyone wants to be Jay.
Everybody looks up to Mike, but not
be.
Everybody wanted to be Mike.
LeBron wants to be Mike. That's why he's 23.
He wore 23 because Mike is his favorite player, but he's a whole different animal.
That's true.
Of course he's different because it's a different time, it's a different perspective, but he still wants to be Michael Jordan.
I don't think he wants to be Mike. I think he has aspirations to be greater.
Yes.
Even Kobe wanted to be greater than Mike.
But Kobe wanted to be Mike though.
Yeah,
Kobe for sure wanted to be Mike. I give you that. Kobe wanted to be Mike.
Thank you. Everyone wants to be Jay-Z. Everyone.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Really?
I'm going to agree.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think so.
Everybody admires Jay-Z's business skills and how he did it, but I love the Rockefeller crew, and when they had Kareem Biggs and Damon Dash and Jay-Z, and all of them had an important part in making that whole Rockefeller.
What about Memphis Bleak?
Mm-hmm.
Mem Bleak is his son. Yeah, Mem Bleak is.
Read Decoded. It's a great read. Read Decoded. You have a new respect for Jay.
Didn't I buy that book for you?
You probably did.
Yeah.
But you should have read it for yourself.
Nah, I mean.
That's how you do it, man.
Yeah.
That's how you do it, man. Buy it, recommend it to somebody else, but don't read it yourself, right?
Exactly.
That's how you do it.
Give back. Now we had our Jay-Z conversation
Yes.
and our LeBron and Michael Jordan conversation. That's out of the way because we usually find a way to get back into that conversation. Well, at least LeBron and Michael.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, it's some way we find a way to make that conversational piece in our podcast. But with depression and and mental health, obviously is one thing. You see kids, and the hard part for me is looking at kids who suffer from these mental deficiencies because. At a certain point, they always say a kid should be a kid. A kid should do kid things. A kid should not be, raised in a house where they have to, watch their little brothers or, clean the house. I mean, well, they got chores, but they shouldn't be raised as adults. You can give them skills and skills that's going to build on them eventually, so when they become a certain age that they will understand that they have more responsibilities. But a kid should be a kid. Now, granted, how many, situations that you probably seen, with little kids, suffering from these mental deficiencies that, plague mostly adults, and that they don't stop at it as the hard part is that people look at a kid and they don't want to, find out what the symptom is. It gets all the way to your adult, and then, for some people it's too late. So, is it any situations that you dealt with kids that you looked at and like, man, what's going on in this household? The parents not there. Is it any situations or examples that you can give us?
I mean, obviously there's a lot, because you're right. And I never think it's too late, but I do think that, and I'm not even sure if it's that people don't want to see the issue. Maybe they don't know how to see it. Maybe because it's been deflected in them, so then they deflect. And no one wants their child to be labeled, quote unquote labeled, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't want to say, this is early stages of anxiety in a kid, or depression, or could they have bipolar traits because it's in our family, and that's something that is genetically passed. So, when we look at what is going on in that particular child, you have to also look back into the family system, which has us also uncover some things that maybe we don't want to talk about and don't want to look at in our own families, right? Because that child is a byproduct of everyone else in the family. Mm-hmm. And so I think education is key. And you're right, early intervention is key. So we say that and use that term for everything in life, right? If you're diagnosed with cancer, what they say, early detection is the key. If you're diagnosed with diabetes, early detection is the key for anything. And giving the right service and the right, therapeutic approach can help any situation. But I do think that when I look at children, you also are limited in the work that you can do, because that child has to go back into that environment. So if you give me 1 hour a week with a child, you're still living in the environment for how many more hours in a week?
Yeah.
And that's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week type of situation. So you have to look at what change can you effectuate on that 1 hour a week. Then I'm with that child, or with any therapist is with that child. And I think that is the hardest part, because you try to bring the family systems in. So you try to bring the parents or the guardians or whatever support system is there, so you can work with them as well, because you have to educate the people that also care for that child. And I think that's one of the hardest things, because as we know as adults, it's really hard sometimes to help people come to a change agent, because, well, this is how it's been done, right? It's how it's been done. This is how this has been done. Mm-hmm. It's kind of that thing, well, just spank them, or just do this, or just punish them. And when spanking and punishing isn't enough, what else do you do?
How do you feel about that, though? Like punishment, like far as spankings and beatings. We got our ass tore up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did too.
Yeah.
I think first of all, I feel like corporal punishment and physical discipline has gone too far. And even probably back then, right? But they didn't have the amount of visibility on it that they have now, right? And so I feel like that is an individual decision for a parent. But I feel like you also have to look at, is this going to get to the root of the issue? And one of the things that I've always said doesn't add up for me, and I tell parents this when we're talking about parent education, is if I hit my little brother and then you spank and discipline me because I hit my little brother, what are you telling me? Don't hit your little brother because you're bigger than him, but then I'm going to hit you because I'm bigger than you. There's another way to teach that dynamic versus it being physical. And again, it's an individual decision, but I think you have to look at, what is that particular method of discipline going to change? Is that how you change that, or is there a better way to change it? And obviously, if you are going to institute corporal punishment, you do not want to do it, in a time when you're upset, when you're angry, and you can't leave bruises and marks. You just can't. You can't leave welts. A welt, if it lasts over 2 hours, is an abuse. A calling offense in terms of abuse.
So you're saying Mama would have went to prison?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mine too.
Yeah.
And, but again, I think that is something that it wasn't that visible back then. Everybody just assumed you got a spanking, you did something wrong, and we moved on. But what about the kids where it wasn't just a spanking, right? And it is taken to another level. And so I think that we have to be aware of teaching any type of violence, even if it's in a parent-child relationship. Because I always tell parents, if you're going to institute that, there needs to be this is why I'm doing it. And I'm doing it at a time when I'm not upset and I'm not angry, so that it is, and what change are you trying to make? It just can't be, I need to beat them because I need to spank them because they're not doing what I need to do. Because then they're still going to do it because, our little brother. Yeah. How many spankings did he get? And he still did what he wanted to do. So I would challenge to say, how was that effective?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because somebody told me a while ago, they said they don't spank their kid. And I said, why? I said, he said, listen. So when you the bigger person, literally, and you spanking your kid can't physically harm you. They know that daddy or mama has that, physical presence, is that they can't harm them. So when you're spanking them as a kid and, they get to a certain age and you're not able to spank them anymore and you're trying to discipline them by talking to them, they're not going to hear it. Because the only discipline they only knew from you was that you spanked them. So talking to them won't make any headway in trying to get your point across, because they say, well, you can't spank me anymore, and whatever you're talking to me about now, I'm not even interpreting or understanding. I don't even want to understand. Now I'm a grown man and you can't do anything to me. So it's kind of like that reverse, in the sense that these kids eventually grow up and they get big, and then you can't hit them anymore. The last spanking I got from mama was in 8th grade. And I cussed out the teacher and she beat me like I stole something. But she didn't spank no, and she said, I'm just going to throw your ass out the house. I said, okay, that works too.
Did you cuss any more teachers out after that, though?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Learned the lesson.
Yeah, I learned the lesson. But, I mean, at the same time, every kid is different.
It's a child-specific thing. I think that's hard for anybody to understand, because we're 4 siblings raised in a household, and we are 4 very different individuals. And so the parenting needed to be specific to that child. But, it's kind of a group thing. This is how I parent everybody in the home. And that doesn't work. It just doesn't, right? Because even our parenting skills with our nephew, shout out to Ashton, is very different in my household than when he's in your household, right? And so it's hard because you're always trying to not feel like the child has the upper hand in the situation, or the child is dictating the situation. But as parents, sometimes you have to lean on other individuals to help, because parenting is not done in a silo.
Nah, that's right.
I believe that it takes some type of village to help rear parenting skills as well as a child.
Okay.
And I think that, runs the gamut. Academics, emotional, social, because I think, it takes someone to say, look, something's not okay here. Let's figure out what that not okay thing is. And it's okay not to be okay, because no one wants to hear that I'm not okay.
Okay.
I have a question to ask about, you were talking about it earlier, with kids and the household and the home they live in and whatnot. So how do you feel about, I guess, a child or a person being a product of their environment? Like, some kids can be in the same environment and make it out okay, and then some kids kind of succumb to the things happening in the house and have mental issues and that kind of stuff. So do you think that's a big factor, or is that kind of per child, or what do you think about that?
I think it's a huge factor. So it's this whole nature versus nurture debate, right? Because they say if you take a child from a parent early on and the environment was not good, and you say they get adopted or they go into a relative placement and they stay in that placement, and that placement is stable for all intents and purposes, it's loving, they provide financially, their child is secure, and they still have traits and behaviors of the old environment, even if they were a baby, right? So then the thought is, well, they got all this nurturing, what happened? Because they're still keyed by, connected biologically to that parent, to that environment. So I think environment plays a huge role in a person's, in their demeanor and their behavior. And I think that while people do make it out, you're right, of different environments, and they can live in the same environment, the same household, and their paths can be different, I think that that's where the individual genetics of that child and that person comes into play, because maybe their system was not as strong internally, and so they needed more nurturing to be able to get out of, to be in that, not be in that environment, and to get out of that environment and not have maladaptive behaviors. And the other person necessarily didn't need as much. So they said, look, this is what I'm trying to do. That's a big
word you just used. What does maladaptive?
Maladaptive?
What does that mean?
So it's like negative behaviors, or undesirable behaviors.
That's a Stephen A. Smith word right there. I'm going to take that one.
So maladaptive behaviors, right?
Maladaptive. Okay.
Yeah. And so I think environment plays a huge role. Internal environment and external environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and with ADD, we were talking about that earlier also. I know when we were kids, I don't recall ever hearing that term ADD. So is it something that's always been around and just been kind of recognized as a problem, or what are your thoughts on that?
And
Because it's like everybody has it now. You know what I'm saying? So what's the turning point on that?
Let me piggyback off of Mike. Is those pills they take cocaine? And you can answer that first question. I want to know if them pills cocaine.
No, they're not cocaine.
It has some symptoms of cocaine though. It speeds them up.
Yeah. Talking about?
Yeah.
What is that?
Them pills is cocaine. When I
Okay.
used to give them pills to DeAndre, I say, it's time to take the happy pills. Yeah.
Prime example of external environmental stresses and maladaptive behavior.
Oh man.
But he did take those.
He did take those pills that were the happy pills, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he took them pills.
So how supportive were we looking back into his, his issues and his mental health and his deficits, as you call it, when we would make those comments? Because we were horrible. We did make those comments.
We did. I mean,
and I think it's a lack of education, and I think we were children, and children do horrible things like that because they're not taught better,
Of course.
right? And so, but looking, if you were that person now, what would you do differently, right?
I wouldn't do that. But you get back on Mike's question. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So yeah, ADD. So what? I guess my question is: has it always been around, and it's just now being diagnosed, or it's something that just recently came up?
According to research, ADHD, and that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and then ADD, the attention deficit disorder, have been around for some time, but they weren't correctly diagnosed, or people misdiagnosed them. Physicians, psychiatrists, they weren't aware because it was a new emerging thing, similar to autism. They said that they believed that people that were diagnosed in the past with mental retardation and other things really was autism, but they didn't know that autism existed until they got research and they did funding for it to get these clinical trials to say, no, actually some of this is autism, it's not this. And so they say it's been around for a long time, but I personally feel like it's overdiagnosed. I think that if you bring a child to me and they have trauma, I tell a parent or a guardian, I'm not going to diagnose until we address this trauma. So I need to find out what the root of the trauma is, because again, it can look a lot like ADHD, right? It can look a lot like those symptoms, because I'm dealing with trauma and I don't know how to deal with it. So let me create distractions. So let me not sit down. Let me not focus. Let me create an environment where maybe if people focus on me, they won't focus on each other. And so if there's violence in the home, that's a very key indicator. Children try to either deflect from the violence, so they may do things to create, okay, well, you'll look at me and you'll focus on me, you won't focus on each other, so the violence won't happen. But if you won't sit down, I don't know that, right? I'm not looking at that trauma. I'm like, you don't sit down, I'm taking you to the doctor. I tell the doctor this, the teacher checks that off, and you have ADHD or symptoms of ADHD or ADD, right? That's simplistic, but a lot of that does happen. Because no one's asking the questions, why aren't you sitting there? Well, why are you always active? What is going on? What happens at home? Or if you're by yourself a lot and you have to entertain yourself so that you're not scared, because maybe mom works night shift or dad works night shift and you're home by yourself. So you carry those traits on into school because you're used to moving about and going around so that you don't frighten yourself. And they don't understand that. They just say you won't sit down, right?
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Autism. Can you explain autism? I've always heard the term. I never knew exactly what it meant. Like what defines autism?
So there's different levels or different types of autism. So what they use now is they call it the spectrum. And so you can be on either end of the spectrum in between. So there's, high functioning autism where individuals, you saw the movie Rain Man?
I've never seen Rain Man.
Yeah, I saw Rain Man.
Okay.
Classic.
Okay, so you know how he had this very inept way of listening to something and doing the music, and he didn't have to read, and he just knew that music, like he was very inept. Like, so you have individuals who they aren't necessarily social, they don't engage with others. So autism is a social disorder, so they either are awkwardly, uncomfortable with other individuals socially, and sometimes they lose verbal ability if it's very severe. And so Asperger's is high functioning autism. So you do well academically, you can perform well at work. Socially, you're not inept to deal with other individuals, or it's a struggle for you socially. And so you necessarily may isolate and do other behaviors, but you can perform well at specific tasks.
So Asperger's is a form of autism.
They consider it the high functioning form of autism.
Didn't know that.
I always looked at autism as like, what's happening? Those kids, those kids have like they all look the same. What is that? Like
Like Down syndrome.
Down syndrome.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I thought that was part of autism.
No. That's Down syndrome.
Okay, so I seen that. Cause I was watching this guy one time. I think they said he had autism or Asperger's. I don't know what he had, but he was able to look at these landscapes of like cities and then go through and like draw the landscape from memory and everything, or whatever. So I was just kind of curious about how autism works. So I guess if it's high functioning levels of autism, then that's probably where.
Then it's Asperger's, yes. And then there's, on the lower end of the spectrum, those are individuals that may not be verbal, they don't have verbal ability. It's really hard for them to engage in any academic or social interactions. And so, again, early detection, because you can have a child that's born and they meet all of their milestones, but at a certain age, and it's usually about around age 2.5 to 3, they start regressing in terms of the things that they used to do. So they may say fewer words. They may not. They may stop potty. They can potty train. They're potty trained inappropriately, and they revert back. So those are symptoms that you need to look for to then get them further tested.
Okay, it's interesting.
What are symptoms of depression? I know most people tell you that you start seeing people more reclusive. You start seeing people who are more agitated, who are very angry. What are the key symptoms to depression that most of our people in our audience can look at to say they can diagnose somebody and say, hey, you might be depressed, if it's something that they can probably pinpoint.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Another question about depression too. I mean, it's stack questions, but with depression, is it like a lifelong thing, or can you get depression as an adult? You see what I'm saying? Like have you always had it and it kind of just started to show its symptoms, or is something you can just start falling into as you get older?
So it's a little bit of both. And so there's different types of depression. So let's kind of stagger the answer to this question. So there's different types of depression. So you'll have depression, which is NOS, which is not otherwise specified, meaning we don't really know what the root of the cause of your depression is. You just have depressive symptoms. You have a loss in interest in things you used to once enjoy doing. And the marker is it had to occur for 6 months or more, and it has to be within a 2-year period.
Okay.
So maybe it happened in 1999 for 4, 5, 6 months, and then you didn't have it again until 2012. Then we wouldn't necessarily say that's depression, because that's a big gap, right? So you're looking at 2-year increments, and you're looking at that 6-month window. And then you have depression with anxiety. You have depression with conduct disorder, meaning disturbance of behavior and conduct, which means you're not doing things the way you used to do them. You're not able to function the way you used to. Maybe you're more swift to anger. Maybe you're more lackadaisical in your daily duties. So there's all different types of depression. But for basic depression, like depression not otherwise specified, you have depression. Again, it's lack of interest in things that you used to once do. For some individuals, they're not able to perform daily duties that they used to do. So it's really hard to get out of bed. It's really hard to take a shower. It's really hard to clean your house, go to work, things like that. And you can have sporadic periods of depression. Seasonal depression is a real thing for people that live, like in Alaska, seasonal depression is at a very high rate. For individuals that struggle with the summer, because usually in the summer months, people are really happier. Honestly, that's research based. They're happier than in winter months. And if you live somewhere where the winters are very brutal, people experience seasonal depression and situational depression. So once the winter months clear up and spring starts to come, you start to feel better emotionally. So there are different types, absolutely. And some people have struggled with depression throughout childhood and adulthood, and we would call that's manic depression, because that's ongoing depression, even though you may have periods of, just like when you may have periods where you're in remission and you're doing well, but it's going to reoccur within a year or more period. So about a year, it comes back, maybe a year and a half, but it's still within that 2-year period, it's reoccurring. So we would call that. And then manic depression is really severe. You're not able to, again, get out of bed. You're not able to perform just daily hygiene, eating, cleaning, things of that nature. And then some people never suffer from any type of depression, and in adulthood or adolescence something happens, or there's something emotionally going on, and it sinks them into a depression.
Okay, so how much do I guess like physical factors play a part in depression? Let's say you have a tough job and you're always tired or whatever, so you have the want to do things, but you don't really want to get up and do it. Kind of, you get what I'm saying? Might be describing that kind of wrong, but
No, absolutely. And those are mild forms of depression, because you do have mild, severe, moderate depression. And so if someone has a really stressful job and they start to have anxiety around going to that job and performing those job duties, and the job is so taxing that they're not able to, on the weekends, if they would normally get out and bike or get out and go into the community, they do start to suffer from symptoms of mild depression, because now you're not doing what you normally used to do, and you're not engaging in those activities that once caused you, to have some type of joy or outlet or experience. And so when you start taking those things away, even if they're very minor things, over a period of time they start to add up, and you're not doing any of the things that you used to want to do to the level that you used to do them. And so absolutely, your work performance, the type of work that you do, because they say, well, and I haven't looked at the studies recently, but police officers, dentists, and there was another profession, they had the highest rates of depression. No one likes going to the dentist, right? Mm-hmm. People loathe it, right? Mm-hmm. And then police officers, the amount of stress that you're under, as well as what's going on in the society, because you are viewed either as the hero in the situation or you're viewed as the enemy in the situation, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very up and down in terms of how people view law enforcement and things like that. And so those professions, particularly, along with a lot of other professions, I think accounting, because it's another one that's very isolated at times.
Yeah, I understand.
And so when you're isolated and then entertainers, believe it or not, have high rates of depression, because after, they have to give so much, mm-hmm. and it's all in this performance. You always have to look good, right? You always have to have a good day. You can't just run to the store in your sweats. You have to always be on. Well, what happens when you can't be on that day? You're not allowed to, and then you're very isolated, because you don't want people to know that you're not having a good day. You don't want people to know that things aren't going well, right? Mm-hmm. I think Wale was very open about the depression he's experienced from not having the success of his albums. I'm not thinking even financially, but just being critically acknowledged for the work that he's done.
Yeah, the album's been trash. The album's been so trash. Oh my God.
And he's talked about his family upbringing, because I think he's of Nigerian heritage, and I think I heard an interview with him where he said he was the only one that was speaking, that was able to speak English in the family for a very long time, or fluently speak it. So no one came to PTO meetings and football games and all that stuff. So he did those things very independent, without parent support. So he felt like his depression had been there for a long period of time, and then it just continued to increase, especially with him being involved in the rap, industry, the music industry, and what that toll takes on you in the comparison, So he talks openly about that as well.
I know DeMar DeRozan, a player for the Raptors, recently came out and said he suffers from depression, mm-hmm. and they were having a discussion about that, how brave he was for saying that, because, of course, in sports, you don't want to show any kind of mental weakness or whatnot. Absolutely. So he was coming out saying he suffers from depression. So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of guys in the NBA. I mean, just by the numbers alone, just the amount of guys there, I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of guys suffering from the same thing also, but don't talk about it because they don't want to be perceived as weak-minded or anything like that or whatever. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Athletes specifically, have another rate of isolation, because you're right. They don't want that to be perceived as a weakness. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the acting out behaviors are mass depression. I'm going to mask it by doing this behavior. Dennis Rodman talked about it a long time ago, that he was experiencing a lot of depression. He was experiencing a lot of anxiety, but the way he would try to mask it was to be, as he said, like this circus out there with the dresses and the makeup and the wild antics, because he felt the more he portrayed that image, the less people would be able to see that he was really struggling internally with anxiety and depression. Oh, man. So he talked about that a lot. Michael Jordan even talked about struggling with depression.
MJ?
Right? Yeah. After
the Black Cat.
Yeah, Black Cat.
After the baseball fiasco, when he didn't perform well,
he was trash. That was just what he did was. I mean, I understood what he did at the time to get away from basketball, and his pops passed away. But he went out there and took somebody's roster spot, man, to live a boy dream. He was garbage.
But his father passed. He failed at this. This stint of wanting to reinvent himself in this different career. And when you come from being the greatest, right, or the perception of the greatest, right, and you don't perform well, what does that do to you? Yeah. And who do you talk to that about? And so he talked about how he felt like his gambling was a manifestation of those feelings of depression. And so he would go out to do things to make him feel better. Right, and so you had lots of money, so you can bet and you can play and you can get the high from winning, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think that therapists are needed at work or any profession? I mean, heck, porn people need therapists. They go into porn sets every single day. They need therapists before they go perform. Then, you got people going to work and do construction work. They need probably some therapists to make sure that they get through the day because, they can die instantly.
Absolutely.
And even the accountants and the guys who work on the, work at the docks, they need therapists. So do you think having a therapist readily available at certain jobs would, help decrease depression and some symptoms of depression? Because, waking up and going to work is one thing, but loathing your job and loathing your boss and, having these things that you have to deal with every single day at work and that you don't want to bring home, you bring home. So sometimes they say that you leave it at the workplace, but sometimes you can't. So you think having a therapist overall at most jobs would, help with depression and help people overall in society?
Absolutely. I know it's fictional, but I don't know if you've ever seen the HBO show Billions.
Mm-mm.
You should watch it. It's amazing.
I heard about that.
So Billions is, I think it's based off like a hybrid of like what they think Microsoft and all these other companies, Amazon have, but they have a therapist, right? So they don't loathe their boss or they don't loathe it. They love it, but they are investment brokers, bankers making high, billion-dollar, million-dollar deals. And so the stress of trying to always be on top and succeed, right? And so they have a therapist in-house. And so her job is to work with the brokers or work with the owner of the company, and they can come and talk to her at any time and have sessions about their family life and what they're dealing with and their anxiety and different things. And so the theory is that they're performing better because they can take that break and go downstairs, or they can go, on lunch or wherever and go talk to her, right? And so I think Bill Gates actually does have a therapist on staff for his companies, for his company in his different locations. I think Amazon does too, because I think people are valuing the fact that you're a better employer to your employees when you're offering these services. And so they don't have to go outside of their work hours. They don't have to sacrifice weekends and work time and lunch breaks. They can go down in the vicinity and have this available to them. I think that is something that companies should definitely look into, because you do have employee assistance programs through different avenues for state workers, county workers, private companies, but they still have to go outside of their agency to get that service. And while that's great that it's available, because that has always been available, I think that if you had someone on site, I think that would definitely help, or even bring them in once a week or once a month so that people could be seen, or every 2 weeks, being, just saying, look, this is something that's very needed, and we want you to have access to it, readily access to it. You don't have to worry about co-pays. You don't have to worry about finances. You can just take advantage of this. Kind of like the military provides on-site child care, right, for the military bases. So they don't have to worry about who's taking care of their children, how they're going to get them there. They can go in if they're on a break or whatever and see their child, have that time. Things that will help people feel more grounded.
I think being a billionaire compared to being a millionaire, is the same type of, because let me put this in full context. You have people today who are trying to get to a certain status in life. And, for the people I call ourselves, we playing with monopoly money. We're not playing with real money. These billionaires and millionaires are playing with the real money. We just living day by day. So with these billionaires and multimillionaires, you think these people suffering from depression just as much as, and we talked about NBA players and stuff like that, and you talked about people trying to make billions in this fictional show, but how do you think that plays a role into how they perceive the world, and how, in looking at other people who are not on their level, being millionaires or billionaires, that they suffer from, depression, that nobody can, have the access to the goods that they have? You think that's, you think that's a part of the world too, as far as, how billionaires and millionaires look on society and say, hey man, they suffering from certain things that they can't provide to everybody because they made it, but they can only help a select few?
I definitely think that despite whatever economic status you're in, everyone can suffer from some type of mental health issue, depression, anxiety. Even when it's great things happening, right? You have anxiety that, so many good things are happening at once. What's going to happen, right? We've heard that story. Too many good things at once, something bad's going to happen, right? And so I think that sometimes maybe that's why, certain companies like the Oprah Winfrey Network and Microsoft are saying, look, I have all these employees and all these people, and I can't necessarily, or they probably can do everything for everyone in the world, but, I'm not able to change everything, but I can change this environment. So if you work here, you work for Harpo Studios, if you work for Microsoft, we can give you this access to these resources. But I do think that, despite the millions, billions, or the person that's working 9 to 5, there are all still levels of stressors that we deal with, right? It's because if you are Bill Gates, you're running Microsoft, right? In theory, right? I don't know if he really runs it anymore, but you're charged with all these innovative things, and everyone expects more from you and more from you. And Apple expects more we expect more from the next iPhone and the next Samsung and the next. So there's always this level of what's next. And I think that in and of itself creates anxiety within anybody, because you have to say, well, when is enough going to be enough? Because we live in a society now that nothing is ever just good enough, right? We're always looking for the next best thing.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, even as a therapist myself, how do I hear all the things I hear every single day and it not affect me? Right?
Yeah, the therapist need a therapist.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Because you need self-care. You need to be able to figure out a way to do what you can do to help, but that's not something I can just leave there. Right? Because I hear the worst of the worst. Yes, people do come to therapy to tell you some great things, but most people are coming to therapy because things are not well in their life in some form or fashion.
Now, how do you think therapy and mental health affects the black community in general?
I don't like to generalize, but I can say being an African-American female and being a part of the African-American culture, just from what I have experienced in my environment and with my family and outside of my family context and my community context, I feel like our culture and our environment still struggles with mental health.
You think slavery had a part in that? If you had to look at the lineage of how that has affected mental health, or do you think that's a separate issue in itself? Sorry to compound on that question, but do you think that slavery had an effect on how people, far as the black community, how some people suffer from mental health, or you think it's more of a current type of thing?
I think any population of people that have been oppressed, that is going to be something that is genetically transferred, right? So obviously slavery. You look at the Holocaust. You look at, obviously, how can you not? Yeah, because those are things that have long-lasting effects, continual effects, even from our generation moving forward. It's never going to go away, the impact of that and what that was, right? And so when you take a group of individuals, a culture, an environment of people, and say that you are less than, or you have to be this, or we've determined you're this, how does that not continue to move forward into new generations despite the advances that we have?
Well, they got J's out there now. So, they got Jordans that you can buy, polos, you got gold chains, gold teeth. That makes you feel better. And that one of the things that we was talking about is that, like, people was masking their depression. So for the black community, I like to buy Jordans. Now, I like to wear Jordans because I like to wear Jordans. Now, Jordan my co-host would say,
Jordan coon.
He a coon.
There you go.
Now, I believe he be cooning. Most definitely he a coon in certain situations. But we still buy his sneakers, right? And, certain things I might buy, like polo shirts or, Levi jeans. Whatever the case, I buy these things. And it's not masking anything. It's just I like to buy these things.
But I think that like to buy these things comes from the fact that we have decided that this is a threshold, right? Because we may not have had access to it. So we decide that when we can, we will have access and we will obtain these things for anything that you want, right? So because as a child growing up, you couldn't have told me that I would be able to afford VIP tickets to a Jay-Z concert, right? That wasn't in my immediate environment. I didn't meet people that was what they did. And so when you're able to provide and have that resource, you get it, right? So kind of one of Kanye West's, which I'm not a fan of, but one of the things he said, So basically, like paraphrase, he said that he was on 106 in Park with all of these gold chains, and he bought a Benz before he had a house to match. And he's like, and I was still insecure. So you are taking what looks like the American dream to mask, because yeah, you didn't have a house, you had gold chains, you had a Bentley or whatever, a Benz, but like he said, but I was still insecure. But who do you tell that to when you're trying to be a part of a larger being, right? Rockefeller, when you're trying to infiltrate this system, and when people buy albums because they want to feel like they're connected to this lifestyle. We go to these concerts so we can be connected to this lifestyle. We go to NBA games and football games to be connected to the lifestyle. You don't want, I mean, maybe country music might, because they're depressed, you know, the dog, the truck or whatever, right. But you buy it for the hype, right? What's the new song DJ Khaled has out? Drop the Top on the Maybach.
Man,
everybody wants to be in that feeling.
I'm not feeling that song right now.
I just found out what your problem is.
Exactly.
That's
I don't even want to make back, but I want to drop the top on them. I mean, it just makes you feel good, right? So we do things, buy things, we live in environments that make us feel good. And it's not because it's necessarily always masking something, but it's also a reason that, look, we can achieve it now. Because if it wasn't that, then why aren't you just wearing regular shirts out of Target and shoes that don't cost $200+?
She got a good point, because when you said that earlier, I struck a chord, because that's the same way I feel. That's why I got more shoes than I need now. When I got out of school and was able to afford to buy my own shoes, I remember in school it was one pair of shoes for the entire year. And when I got out, I got just buying shoes, buying shoes, man. That's true.
Yeah, because you can obtain it now. I'm not a big fan of Christmas, because what were you told when you wanted something? Like Mike said, okay, you get these shoes and this, and then maybe when Christmas comes, you can get something else. Well, we have how many months between August and December? So I don't believe in the Christmas. If I want it, I'm going to go get it, right? Exactly. Because I need to get it now. And if I want to buy this or have my nephew have that, I don't want to wait till a designated time and on the calendar to give you that, because we've had to do that for so long as children, because we did not grow up wealthy. We did not grow up with access to unlimited services. I mean, services and goods, right? We had what we needed. But so I think that thing of, well, I can get it, I can afford it in my mind, so I'm going to go get it. So it's allowing us to, so where is the balance?
Okay. I mean, for people, you know, like you have daughters, right? I have a baby girl too, right? And we got a nephew, right? So kids are impressionable. So when they start seeing things that other kids have, they want it. And if they don't get it, then it causes, you know, a mental rift in their psyche, because they're seeing things that their parents can't afford, and then they're seeing the other kids have it. So, like, you know, you made a reference, once you got older, you stopped buying all the shoes that you needed because your parents said, you know, you can only get one pair of shoes for the whole year. So with a kid at that age thinking about, you know, why they can't buy something because their parent don't have the money, and then once they go out and start splurging, but I still don't link it to mental health. I just think that you got to a point that, you know, once you became older, you was able to, you know, afford these things. Now what happens is that you start to, you know, build up this, this society or this type of mental way of thinking that I have to have these things, and if I don't have them, then something's wrong, that I can't afford them no more. So for instance, like if I was, you know, buying all these shoes and these clothes, and then I lose the job that I have and I'm not able to buy them, and I took happiness in buying these things because I was able to buy them, then, you know, that mental health might creep in because you're depressed because you don't have the goods, the money to buy these things. But I just think overall, you know, living in today's society, I think America paints a picture that tells you that this is what you're supposed to have, this is how you're supposed to live, this is the wife you're supposed to have, this is the husband you're supposed to have, and if you don't have these things, then something's wrong with you.
Yeah. And then let me clarify. I'm not saying because we do these things we're depressed or we have mental health, but I think we didn't have the access to the resources to get it then, so we're going to get it now. And that's the same when I say about the masking for people who do have that anxiety, that depression, that other, you know, mental health issue. Let me mask that by showing and living my best life. That's the new tagline, right? I'm living my best life. That's why Instagram and Facebook and social media is so great, because everyone portrays that they're living the best opulent life that they can, right? We have a few, you know, outliers that rant and rave and talk about how horrible the world and their life is, but very few people show you, right? that life is not good. Because when you go on their Instagram page, you're seeing they're living it up. They're eating the best restaurants, listening to the best music, buying the best clothes, on the best vacations. No one ever puts when they're just sitting home watching TV. Very rarely, right?
Yeah.
Or this. So I'm saying I think that whole masking has come from the society. So it's harder to be open about what you're going through because everyone wants to live the best life. And everyone wants to portray that they're living the best life. Instead of saying, today is not a good day, I'm not okay.
Gotcha.
I'm not okay today.
Gotcha.
And it's okay not to be okay. That doesn't mean you have a diagnosable mental health issue, but the stress of always having to be okay can lead to other things.
Gotcha.
And we have to be aware of that undue pressure that we, as well as society, is putting on individuals. We're putting on ourselves too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I mean, most people want to look at the fact that they have to live up to a certain standard in society, so you can put that extra pressure on yourself to try to go out there and attain these things. But you could take pride in, you know, having a nice house and being able to afford the smaller things, but you can have other outlets that can make you feel good about where you at in life. And I kind of admire that in people who can take other things besides what society paints for them as successful and be successful and what they, you know, have their goals in mind, what they consider as success, and be, you know, accepting of that, you know. So I think that's great. So, you know, what we looking like on time, man?
We are right past an hour, about an hour and 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Because, you know, with mental health, I just think that we talk about the world and we talk about how mental health affects the world, because when somebody tells you they're having a bad day, you automatically say, man, I'm not going to deal with them today. Somebody tells you, as soon as you get off the elevator, like, man, my day is trash and this, you don't even want to hear it. That's the first, like, I ain't got time to hear this.
Yeah, just don't.
Yeah.
Don't come here with that, bro.
But what about somebody? But what about that's a cry for help? What about somebody tells you, like, I
can't help everybody, cuz.
But maybe a kind word here and there might help them.
It depends on the person too.
True indeed, but
it's kind of a combination of both. You gotta be ready. You gotta be willing to do that one, and then like I said, it all depends on the person, man. But 99% of the time, let's be real, man. You don't want to hear that.
Well, most of the time you don't. All right, but I want to say 99%. I say around about 75.
75?
75.
Okay.
Because I mean, you know, because I have a sister who's in the business. I have a brother who's off the chain. So you know, you hear these cries for help and you don't see them symptoms. I mean,
I guess it depends on the frequency too. Because some people always come to you with bad news. They always got something like, man, this happened, that happened. You don't want to hear it, man. You know what I'm saying? So I guess that makes more sense than the frequency. So a person who's normally cheerful or a regular person then comes to you with something, you might be more inclined to listen. But yeah, just normally, I don't think that's much a bad day.
Yeah, well, bad days could turn into good days by one word, or bad days could turn into good days by, you know, giving positive energy. We always talk about energy. How energy never gets destroyed; it just gets transferred. So sometimes it's good just to transfer your positive energy into their negative energy, or maybe their negative thoughts, to have them think positively about something. So,
absolutely.
So, one more question I have for you is, you know, how it affects, you know, the world, and how people paint, you know, racist, you know, I shouldn't say racist, but race in buckets. So you have white, you have black, you have white, you have, you know, Asian, you have, you know, Hispanic, you have all of these, you know, different races, and then you have cultures within these different races, and how people say, well, you know, certain people feel prideful about being in a particular culture, and certain people feel, you know, they feel like they're adapting to living into a different society because they're not, that culture doesn't dominate that society. Like, for instance, let's just say America, and how like certain things in white culture or European culture dominates, you know, American culture, and how people perceive America, instead of having it as one, as a melting pot. You know, we have little flashes here and there from Asian culture and black culture and Hispanic culture and, you know, all of these things like that, but it's more dominated from European culture and holidays and, you know, TV shows and things like that. Do you think, you know, the way that the world is separated in these buckets of race has caused a lot of depression? Because meaning that if I'm a black kid who's from, you know, Mississippi, and every single day the only thing I see on TV somebody's making it is a white guy from, you know, New York or Chicago or LA, and these are the only things that portray in my mind. I don't see somebody's painted in my same image that's doing the things that I want. do you think that can cause a some kind of anxiety or depression, or I'm probably not using the key words here, to make somebody look at something and say, man, I can't do that. I don't even see myself on TV. How can I attain these things? How can I be that? So they fall back into what they see around them, as Mike made a point, like you're product of your environment. Mm-hmm. Do you think these things that America portrays in race and how they portray certain things to cater to maybe one side more often than not? Then, like I said, they cater to, like I said, they have pockets that they show other people doing things, but they cater to one side. Do you think that's, part of causes mental divide in this country and causes people to look at things differently in America as far as, how they view themselves and how they can put themselves into a positive light?
Absolutely. I think anytime an individual, a group of individuals, a culture, or a race feels excluded from what we keep talking about, that larger ability to have access to resources or to attain something, you have the ability, then that leads into low self-esteem, right? Low self-image it can lead to low self-esteem, low self-image, and then sometimes the behaviors, maladaptive, are not as productive as they should be. So if all I see from my particular culture is this type of behavior, right, or this is what's portrayed as this is what everybody does, then what is it going to take, or how am I going to get out of that environment? Because that's that environmental context of, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I can't treat my mental health if I don't know where my food, clothing, and shelter is going to come from.
That's like a human pyramid, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the pyramid.
So he said you have to meet all of those basic needs like food, clothing, shelter, and safety before you can deal with any larger issues in the world. And I think that's kind of what we see. If you still have people that are hungry, it's hard to help them understand how their vote counts, when we're looking at presidential elections and Congress and things like that. When I don't know if I'm going to have a place to stay and heat on, I can't really talk about the movement of how to bring Black culture and, European culture together. And, we can't talk about cultural issues if I can't eat, right? And so we have to be able to bridge that gap between what's attainable resources that everybody should have access to. Mm-hmm. Because when you have any group of people or any individual that feel like they don't have access, that is going to lead itself to something that's not as positive, the positive outcome that we want. Mm-hmm. And so we have to look at that. I think I've heard a lot about that looking at the Black Panther. I haven't seen the movie, but, people, I've seen the little memes on social media and people have been talking about it, and they say, this is the first time in a very long time African American culture is portrayed in a positive light. So they're kings, right? Mm-hmm. They're wealthy. They're doing great things. It's not the stereotypical drug dealing, shooting, killing, rape, all of that, right? So that's great for the generation to see these comics come up and they look like, you and I, right? Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of thing. We have to portray that picture. But absolutely, I think, not portray it, but it has to be out there more. Because there is all of those positive things. There are all those positive things for every culture. You can look at positive individuals and positive movements, but when you're only looking at one mainstream culture and everyone else is negated out of that, then what does that lead to?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the Cosby Show was one of the few shows that when we was growing up in a different world, and even back then, even watching shows like Martin and Living Single and Fox and NBC had a run of having some great shows that show, Black folks in a positive light. But then, you always gonna have your yin and your yang, right?
Because now the Cosby Show is marred with the allegations about Bill. So who's really watching that now?
Right. And nobody's really watching it. But, at the time when they did the Cosby Show, when we was watching it, they had Bill as a doctor and his wife Alicia Rashad as a lawyer, and they said this wouldn't work. Who's going to believe this? Mm-hmm. Who's going to believe you have a Black doctor and a Black lawyer living in the same house and they raising their kids in a brownstone in New York City? Nobody's going to believe that. And they failed to realize from the mainstream that people want to watch this, and that was from all cultures because people like to see things in positive light. And for some people, I heard that when they watched A Different World, that made them want to go to college.
Yeah, I heard so many people tell me they went to HBCUs because they wanted it to be like, what they saw on TV was a Hillman. Mm-hmm. They wanted to be in a different world, and they wanted to go to college or have the aspiration of college. And that's amazing. So we have to combine all of our individual as well as our cultural differences and bring them together. I mean, I know that sounds like a we are the world, but the way we work on healing mental health is to be inclusive of everybody. It's not a Black thing. It's not a white thing. It's not a it's a human thing. Gotcha. And we have to be open to talking about it. it can't be silenced. It's everything. It can't be silenced because it's okay if you suffer from anxiety. It's okay if you suffer from depression. It's okay. It does not define you. There's help out there. There's resources. And we have to start very young, early intervention. Postpartum is a huge situation. Women give birth and postpartum depression is major, but people downplay that. They deflect it. Oh, okay. X amount of people have had babies. Why are you any different, right? So we can't deflect and minimize what a person is experiencing, especially in our children. We have to start there because it goes and it goes, and then they're the 50 and 60-year-olds that are sitting on my couch telling me about what happened when they were 5 and 6.
Gotcha. Hey, that's a good way of looking at it. And
yeah.
I just think that, and I talked with Mike about this on the podcast, is that in my opinion, I feel like you have to understand your culture and have a basis. Like you said, Maslow's law is having that, the food, the shelter, stuff like that, for somebody to actually deal with the other things outside the world. I feel like you have to have a positive basis within your culture to, move forward because, once you have certain things that you you see TV or you look on the internet and these things portray a certain way of, looking at your culture, it has a negative connotation unless you're strong enough to break through that. Because I think a lot of people think that the exception is the rule when it comes to different cultures. Meaning that if Mike made it as, a lawyer or a doctor or engineer and he went through these situations, then we all can do it. But that's not the case because Mike is an individual and he can do what he needs to do. So in my opinion, I think you can't integrate into culture until you understand what your culture is.
Absolutely.
So that's it's not to bring a negative connotation on saying that you don't want to be a part of people's culture, but I value understanding other people's cultures and understanding where they come from and learning their languages and learning this. I don't think I should, try to force feed what I believe should be the mainstream way of thinking into somebody else's culture. And it's good to have different opinions. So once you deal with somebody from black culture or from European culture or from an Asian culture or from Hispanic culture, they're going to have that basis of understanding from their culture. And then once they come to you for like counseling, you can understand where they're coming from because they're going to tell you. And then you can say, okay, let me try to deal from this from a perspective. I'm trying to understand where they're coming from. And then maybe I can bring the mainstream of therapy into their culture to, try to integrate those two to make them one. Instead of trying to say, this is therapy, I don't understand where you coming from, this is how it's supposed to be, So, yeah, that's just how I feel, So, Mike, you think you need to go see a therapist, bro? Because I think lately, man, you always been telling me about your stats and how many threes you've made and stuff like that in the game.
Appreciate it.
You hit 6 threes, and we always talk about our City League basketball game.
And it was a Kings update.
Yeah, and we had I had my best performance. So I had 4 turnovers, maybe 5. Mike got on me because I threw a pass behind my head, but I thought I was doing something fancy. I scored 6 points, the highest points I scored this year. But I'm not as good as I used to be. So 6.
Yeah.
I suffer from basketball. I need basketball therapy. So I felt bad. There's plenty of nights I went home. I said, I'm this bad." And so, he's been playing pretty good. He's solid. He's nothing spectacular, but he's been playing solid.
There goes the hate.
Yeah.
Boy, I tell you, man. This is the way you put it, man. We went a dismal 6-6 this year, so I can't really say too much about this season. It was terrible.
2 of those games was forfeit.
It was fun, but it was exactly 2 of those wins came from forfeits. We really won 4 games. 4 games, 2 forfeits, and 6 losses. And the last game, we got completely embarrassed. We started the half up 12 and ended up losing by 12. So that's
Yeah, that was ridiculous. Yeah, but yeah, that's sometimes you need therapy. From your friends when you talk. Every time we lose a game, we have a huddle and we talk. Yeah. So I just think that when it comes to people and therapy, man, and everybody around the world, I think everybody should go out there and at least try to get some type of therapy. I'm thinking about actually getting. I can't have you be my therapist because that's a conflict of interest.
Yes, and I don't want to be.
Yeah, yeah, but I would like to talk to somebody and get.
I think it is beneficial for everyone to at least have the experience, right, of the vulnerability. Because when you're in school, they do ask you to go to a therapist as part of like your craft, so you'll understand what you're asking someone else to do. So how am I going to ask you to be vulnerable if I've never allowed myself to be vulnerable? And I think that's a good lesson for anyone, because we have to be vulnerable in all our professions at some point in different ways. So just having that ability to be vulnerable.
Okay. Do you is there any information that you can give out to our audience about maybe going out to seek therapy, or places that maybe you can plug? Obviously you're going to plug yourself, so you might want to plug yourself again and maybe give out your information and stuff like that so they can come check you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Lane Counseling and Consulting Group, LLC. We have we have a website, and it's that actual name. And then you can also call us at 850-665-0027. We have several therapists there that can assist you. And Psychology Today is another great resource. You could go on, put your zip code in your area. They'll pop up all of the therapists in your area for the different specialties that you're looking for, whatever is marriage counseling, family counseling, individual. So I always employ people to go through Psychology Today because they verify that those are actual therapists and their credentials are legit.
Not street therapists.
Yes, and so I think that's great. And for individuals that do not have the ability to pay for services either through insurance or through private pay, you have the Neighborhood Health Center that provides provides resources to services to low income and individuals, so that helps a lot, and they do a reduced rate for that. You also have the Bond Community Health Center. They provide access to resources as well. So I think that those are all really good obstacles because really good options, because we're also out trying to provide to everyone. So we want the access to be there regardless of the economical or financial ability. So
okay, good. Yeah, I think that's great. I think most people, if you hear that, y'all write this information down. Y'all go take it. I think everybody should have a mental therapy day, or talk to somebody who can, you can express your concerns to. I mean, sometimes talking to your significant other, you might get slapped in the face. Talking to your friend. No violence. No violence in therapy. No violence in therapy.
And for students, also go to your student union, because they have access to resources. Every major university in Tallahassee, and I'm sure surrounding areas, has a mental health facility there. So you have a counseling, some call it counseling center, some call it student resource center. But I know for FSU and FAMU, you're able to see the clinicians there, I think 3, maybe 6 times max, but I know it's 3 for FSU, and then they try to refer you out. It may be similar for FAMU. TCC also has one. So utilize the resources that are there for you.
Okay. Can you, now, before we got, on the podcast, we did talk about a little bit of that, and the fact that students can go to these particular places around their campus, and they can only go 3 times. But for the student athlete, they can go multiple times. They can go, I guess, endless times, right? To get this, therapy from these people. And we was talking about the fact that most of these kids, not every single one of these kids, but most of these kids who are student athletes, big-time football players or basketball players or baseball players, whatever the case might be, their backgrounds are not always the best. And then when they get to school, they're the big man on campus, and then and then certain things are happening at the household that is causing them, that they can't really focus on school, that they still have to focus on what's going on because crazy things are happening. But the point we was trying to make in our conversation before we got on the podcast is the fact that it's students out there who can only go see the therapist or whoever they need to see on their campus 3 times, but the student athlete can go multiple times. And the only reason why I think is because of that is because these guys make millions and millions of dollars for the universities. And they don't look at the students as making millions and millions of dollars for these universities. So they get thrown out to pasture. Can you elaborate on, that aspect of why, maybe a athlete can go see the therapist multiple times compared to an actual student?
And it may be as simple as the funding source. NCAA just passed a recent ruling that student athletes should have equal access to mental health services as they do physical health services. So just like going to the doctor to check on their knee or whatever injury, they also should be able to have that unlimited access to a mental health provider to help them with whatever emotional or other factors are available. So maybe it's the funding source, but also maybe it's the the utilization. So if students start going more to their local counseling centers on campus and getting those resources and advocating through their student government, advocating through when they have the student meetings that it's a much needed service and they needed to expand, the voice can be heard, and hopefully they will expand that service array. So I think that it's also about, are we using the resources that are there? Because like we just talked about, there's still a lot of stigma around mental health. And so maybe they're looking at the fact that the athletes are using it more. The student athletes may be using it more. And so that was the need, because obviously NCAA saw that need and they, provided for that. So I think we do need to, encourage the students to rally around that. Parents need to rally around that. If you have, students attending different universities, ask those questions at the orientation. Ask those questions when you go to have those student meetings so that there can be additional access and referrals on site.
Okay.
And I was going to agree with what you were saying, too, with student athletes. That makes sense. Like, they have access to physical doctors. So it makes sense that they will have unlimited access to a mental doctor also, considering the fact they can't get a blown-out knee, and then you're like, all right, you got to go find your own doctor. You know what I'm saying? I think the team and the organization has to provide that stuff for them. So I'm pretty sure that's why there's the difference that they can go whenever they want to versus a normal student or whatnot. So.
Okay. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Like, yes, and I can see that point. So I just think that the NCAA is trash, by the way. Okay. They need to be paying these kids.
I agree.
The fact that these kids make millions and millions of dollars is a whole different topic. We're going to have that discussion on a different podcast. But, I do respect the fact that they do have, these mental therapists that it can help them and, after injuries, or even, even not even having an injury, that it can go see a therapist if they wanted to, I'm pretty sure. So, that's great for these young men, and but I, like I said, we live in a society,
and women,
yeah, yes, women, yes, yes. We in the Me Too movement, so I can let me make sure I mention women.
Shout out to all the women.
Shout out to all the women. Yes,
so we all have to be our own advocates, and I think as a community we have to advocate for services, and we have to be able to say if it's needed, let's provide it in our churches, in our schools, in our community, at our colleges, because your voice counts, your dollars count, and so I think if you realize the importance of it and you advocate for it, it will happen. Because I think the insurgence of mental health now, in terms of just available resources, is at the highest it's ever been, right? Because it's not, it's accessible to a lot of different people. So I think if we continue to do that, more and more people will have access.
Cool. Well, yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for me. I don't have any other questions. You have anything?
No. I just want to send a special thanks to Jovasha for stepping in today. He got a lot smarter today. Usually me and Cam.
Oh yeah.
Usually me and Cam talk about a bunch of junk in here and everything. So we definitely appreciate you coming in and giving us some insight on mental health and some other things and whatnot. We definitely got to bring you back for the silliness one day, though.
Yes.
We'll bring you in for total silliness, so it's coming.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, make sure, like we always say at the podcast, make sure you go to our SoundCloud page, Nothing Above the Moon. Go out there and subscribe to the page. The developer is still working on Facebook and Instagram and Stitcher Radio and stuff like that. So we're gonna get these things fixed. We're gonna have the podcast with Stitcher Radio and iTunes, so you can go out there and subscribe to those websites as well to pick up our podcast. And then as far as Instagram and Facebook, we're going to have that platform as well. So if y'all on social media, you can go out there and get that information, and we'll make sure to tag some of your friends, so you can get the latest and greatest of our podcast. And like me and Mike was always talking about before, is that we're going to try to get community things started. We're going to have try to do book bag drives. Obviously, as Jovasha talked about, maybe we can, talk about mental health with certain kids who might need to be provided, who can, we can, direct them into, to these services and things like that. And, all these things in the community that I feel like people need overall to make sure that, they have a good day and have good energy that they can, keep transferring to the next person. So, just want to kind of throw that out there. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it. And
okay. What about the questions to our Nothing Above the Moon?
You know what, man.
At 6
Nothing Above the Moon 60 at gmail.com. We're still looking for questions for our lunch break. Apparently nobody wants to participate, so at some point we'll get it going, but it's whatever, man. If you want to send an email, send it. If not,
yeah, the only thing we got right now is, why do white girls have big booties?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do a 30-minute lunch. Well,
I'm down for that, but
I mean, we can. Okay. I guess. I
gotta be versatile, man.
Yeah,
We'll talk about anything.
Yeah, I don't mind talking about white girls with big booties, but okay. I mean, I mean, at one point we need some more. We need we need more.
We need more.
We need more. So, but other than that, I just like I said, I want to piggyback off on Mike and thank you for coming. You can obviously you're our first guest.
Yes.
So we got many more. So you started it off. So you popped that cherry for this episode for having our first guest. And I think overall, I think you laid out some great points for people to take and make sure they can use that information and take that to heart and make sure that if there's anything that they need as far as mental health, I think you laid that out perfectly and you laid out some great definitions. And you're a genius in that stuff. I mean, you did a great job. So
yeah.
I'm proud to be your younger brother. Only on these days, because when you be out there wilding, watching Jay-Z, in these concerts, I don't want to know you. So yeah. So
all right, one more time. It's Lane Counseling and Consulting.
Lane Counseling and Consulting Group LLC, and it's 850-665-0027.
Cool. All right. So I always lead the podcast with some great words.
Okay, I'm ready. Here we go.
Yeah, every podcast starts with a great word and ends with a great word.
Here we go.
And today's key word is Ritalin. And make sure that if you ever see a Ritalin pill, you don't put it in your mouth. That is crack cocaine. Don't let nobody tell you nothing different. It's crack. And they used to provide crack in the form of a prescription drug that they used to give kids. So don't let nobody tell you anything different. Ritalin is crack.
Okay.
Keyword Ritalin, R-I-T, I guess I-A-L-I-N. I don't know.
No.
Oh, dang! Did I look? What is Ritalin? It's R-I-T-A-L-I-N. What did I say?
I don't know what you said, but I knew it was wrong.
Well, crack. See, crack. It's crack. That does.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So, but let me leave you with a very good word. Make sure each one teach one. Go out there and see somebody and teach them something. Make sure that if you have a positive word, give it to them. If you have something that you can give somebody by, extending your hand, or maybe making sure that people understand that you're always there for them. That's a each one teach one moment. And I think overall people need to lean on each other and remember that we are, in her famous words, or Jay-Z famous words, I shouldn't say her, because she sometimes I think Jovasha is Jay-Z, that we can all be each other's crutches. And that's what society needs to have, is everybody be each other's crutches. So make sure that you go out there and each one and teach one. And that's it for me, man.
All right, folks, we are out of here.
Gone.